I get this so much where people are like, again, either they're like, oh, you're trying to meet God on your terms, or they'll be like, well, maybe they weren't actually really trying and authentically seeking God. And it's like, how the fuck do you know whether I'm being authentic or not? Hello and welcome. My name is Nehemiah, and I am reacting to Hopsin Illmind 7 today. I specifically wanted to react to this because I love watching reactions, and it's just so insightful to me to see different people with different perspectives to break down different songs, and especially all the react channels for the really lyrical rap songs by Eminem and different people. They do really great breakdowns where they catch all the punchlines and all the wordplay that goes way over my head when I listen to it. But sometimes when it comes to philosophical and psychological concepts in songs, a lot of people kind of miss those or don't quite understand them because maybe they haven't been there. So I don't necessarily want to be reacting to tons of videos all the time, or like every song that ever comes out by music artists I like, but I do want to react to some of the songs that really address some of the things in life that I'm more familiar with, because I love thinking about and talking about the psychological aspect of people's lives. And so I thought I would start with this song because I grew up Christian. I've been Christian for almost all of my life up until about a year and a half ago. And I often say that I didn't choose to leave the faith, I feel like is the most accurate way of putting it, but rather I couldn't continue in the faith because I couldn't convince myself that it was actually true. And I didn't exactly enjoy that or like that. And it was really tragic to me to have to leave because it wasn't just the foundation of everything I'd believed most of my life, but it also represents the people I grew up with and the culture I grew up in. There are things that might seem silly like VeggieTales or youth group, but those are things that I relate to other Christians on. And stepping outside of a Christian community, I run into people who just don't get what it was like for me to grow up. And that's not the most fun. And it's also just kind of really frustrating to suddenly be on the outside of a group that you used to be on the inside with. And not just that you used to, but that you always were. That like you were born into this group. So anyway, however it goes, I super relate to this song. And I mean, by this point you probably pick up on the fact that I've definitely heard the song before. I've watched like every React channel that did this song. I've watched their breakdown and stuff, and the reason I want to make it is because I don't think I found a reaction video with somebody who really felt like they connected and went through what he's talking about. And while there are definitely a lot of elements to the song that different people can relate to on some level, I personally feel really strongly that while obviously my journey is different from his, I don't know that he grew up as strongly in the Christian faith as I did. I think he might have come to it later in his life and then changed his mind. But for me, the frustration and the questions like emotionally connect to me so strongly. So without saying anything more, I'm going to react to Illmind of Hopsin number 7 and hopefully provide some insight to others who haven't gone on this journey necessarily. So without saying anything more, here we go.
Fuck anybody I might alarm. Life is a tour, I sit and ride along, taking some notes and then I write the songs. I'm staring down the road, my life is gone. Is this where I belong? Is it wrong to not believe in right and wrong? My mental state is fucking me up and I cried upon while asking you for some answers, but we don't have that type of bond.
Okay, so just like right out the door, it's gonna be hard for me to remember some of the stuff he says because it's like the memory is the first thing to go when you like feel under pressure, and I feel under pressure right now. But specifically, just out the gate, when he has the line, life is a tour and I'm just here riding along and then I write these songs, it's such a it's an indication that he's a very self-reflective kind of person. And something a lot of people don't get to in their lives is understanding the fact that they're just another human being. So many of us get stuck up in our heads and we're so focused on like us and our lives, and we see all of the world just from our perspective, and we hold on to things really strongly thinking that like what we're seeing and what we're experiencing is like the be all and end all of life because it's ours and it's what we have. But what he's kind of putting here just out from the beginning is this idea that like he's recognizing that he's just like, he's another person And as a person, he's just on this journey and he's just trying to figure things out. And that's a very normal human experience that everybody's experiencing. Yeah.
And down the road, my life is gone. Is this where I belong? Is it wrong to not believe in right and wrong? My mental state is fucking me up, and I cried upon while asking you for some answers, but we don't have that type of bond. Now my desire's gone, and with the way that I've been living lately, if I died right now, you turn the fire on.
And so specifically, he's kind of reflecting on how in leaving the faith, or at least is what I feel like he's saying, that as part of leaving the faith, he's currently kind of in a place, when he's writing this song, of being outside of the faith, and like his mind is messing with him, and it's kind of putting him in a place where he doesn't feel like he's doing things like he's supposed to. And so he's kind of saying that like if God really was real, then like he'd probably go to hell right now because he doesn't think that God is real, or he's not accepting the faith, or accepting like salvation through Jesus. But he's also within that saying that he is trying to like reach out to God and talk to him, but he doesn't feel like he has that kind of relationship with God. So it's kind of interesting that he feels like he's on the outside now, but it's not so much that he chose to be on the outside, but it's almost like he feels like he's on the outside because he doesn't have that kind of relationship with God where he can talk to him.
Sick of this bullshit. Niggas call me a sellout, cause I hopped in Christianity so strongly then I fell out. Now I'm avoiding questions like a scared dog with his tail down. Feeling so damn humiliated cause they looking at me like I'm hellbound.
Okay, this is when it's really starting getting intense. Because, like, he just kind of had intro stuff, and I maybe even said too much on that already. But, okay, so right here, when he says, walking around with his tail between his legs, is, like, avoiding questions from people. And it's funny because when you leave the faith, suddenly everybody wants to know why, and they're asking you questions. And it's extremely frustrating because nobody ever, or most people, don't accept the answers that you give. Because it's like, if you try to say that, you know, I was trying to reach out for God and like I never felt like he was actually saying anything to me, or you feel like it's not true because you were looking for God and didn't find him, and they'll always give these answers like, well, you're trying to meet God on your terms, or like you're not doing it right. And this is going to come up later, kind of the frustration part, but like, you just kind of like, especially when you first come to it in your head that you don't think it's real, like you just don't want to answer everybody's questions. But then they act like, oh, the reason they don't want to answer questions is because they know that they're choosing to leave because they have these other reasons and they're trying to like hide it. And he's just like, it's like I relate to that so much because when I first left, it's like I didn't want to answer everybody's questions, and I got really sick and tired of talking to people about it because everybody assumes all these things about me. And especially the fact that a lot of people have this attitude like, oh, well, now I must be going to hell because I'm not a Christian anymore. And there are a lot of people in my life who don't have the attitude, but there are definitely people who do. And especially being somebody who believed as a Christian that people who weren't Christian were going to hell, it's even really hard for me to not feel like anybody who is a Christian thinks that, even when they don't, because I have a hard time seeing somebody who doesn't believe that as really being a Christian anyway. Or again, that's kind of how I felt when I was a Christian. So, yes, anyway, I so relate to those lines that he just said.
What story should I tell now? I'll just expose the truth. I'm so close to the fucking edge, I should be close to you. But who the...
Ooh, and also, something else he just mentioned is he's like, I'll just expose the truth. And there's this other layer of not wanting to answer questions from people because they're people that you're hiding it from. Because there are people in your life that you don't want them to know that you're not a Christian anymore. Because you know either it's going to be like devastating to them, or they are going to judge you, or they're going to have opinions and attitudes toward you. And especially within my first year of leaving, one of the things I learned the quickest was be really careful who I tell that I'm not a Christian anymore. Because, goodness, there were so many, like, right out the gate, I was like, oh, like, I just learned something new about the world. And the first person I told, who was one of my really close friends, I was just like, this is going to be fine. Like, I'm just going to tell them this is, like, I'm excited, I learned this new thing. But immediately I just ran into, like, they started crying. And then, like, later, like, it turned into this mess. And it, yeah, so fast with so many of the people I told. It was just so hard to, like, yeah, know who to tell. Because I thought I knew how people would react. And granted, a lot of my closer friends, like, we worked it out pretty quickly. But there were certain people who, like, I was really afraid to tell for the longest time. And technically, there's still some people I've never told. It's out on social media now, so it's not really a secret. I think most people probably do know, but yeah. I'm not so scared now, but especially when I first left, I was really scared of who would know, because I just hated the way people would react. It'd make me feel so bad. So
The fuck are you? You never show the proof. And I'm only fucking human, yo, what am I supposed to do? There's way too many different religions with vivid descriptions, begging all fucking men and women to listen.
yes, and so like, yeah, and as a Christian, of course, I had this attitude like Christianity has the truth, and so as a Christian, it was my job to go out and convince people to be Christian. But especially now, not as a Christian, it's so easy to just look at it and be like, goodness, like, everybody is so convinced that they're right, and they're begging you, and they try to guilt trip you, and they try to say all these things, like, Christianity isn't the only religion who has this attitude, like, oh, you really need to believe this, because if you don't, there are going to be devastating consequences. And when people put it that way, it's such a, like, tug on your heart, it makes you want to believe them. And especially for me as a really empathetic person, I always want to believe everybody. And, like, becoming an adult, one of the hardest things for me that I had to learn by necessity is just, like, there's so many people with competing ideas, and as much as I want to agree with people when I'm talking to them because I don't want to invalidate them or disagree with them or say that they're wrong, it's like I just can't obviously agree with everybody. And at some point you kind of have to think about it for yourself. And especially when he says there's no proof, and again he brings this up later in the song, but like everybody's, you know, there are all these competing ideas, and it's just kind of like, what criteria do you use to know who's telling the truth? And if you can't use logic and proof, then what other criteria do you use? Because the people who are Christian say that they just know in their hearts, but then that's what the people who aren't Christian are saying about what they think too. Especially other spiritual religions and stuff, where they know in their heart that they're true. And so for me as Nehemiah, it's like, well, I don't actually know what's going on in their heart as not a Christian, of maybe they're a Muslim, and I don't know what's going on in the person who is a Christian, what in their heart they're perceiving as like something from God. But like for me, in my experience, I didn't feel that or get that. And so the only thing I can think to use is rationale and logic. And using logic, I feel like I've come to a pretty accurate understanding of the world, and I'm completely at peace about it. And I found ways to come to peace and to be excited about my life and to feel like my life matters and my life is meaningful without it coming from religion. So anyway, yep.
I can't even beat my dick without getting convicted. These ain't wicked decisions. I got different intentions. I've been itching to get it. I've been giving.
I'm not entirely sure some of these lyrics what he means, but specifically when he says, he's basically saying that he can't masturbate without feeling guilty about it. And one of the huge things for me that has given me a lot of peace since leaving is realizing that, like, of course, generally in life, all decisions that we make have consequences. But if you measure decisions based on what the consequences are actually going to be, based on what can actually be seen and measured, then you don't have to feel guilty about things that don't actually have negative or catastrophic consequences. Especially something as simple as masturbating, where it's just like, it's just you in your room by yourself. And like, I guess there are definitely things in your head you could be thinking that aren't necessarily healthy or helpful. But on another level, it's just like, why should I spend all of my time feeling guilty about doing something that really doesn't even impact anybody else? So, yeah, anyway. Man, I hate feeling guilty. And like, one of the biggest parts of peace for me in leaving religion and Christianity is being able to not feel guilty about so many things all the time. I feel guilty sometimes, I let myself feel it, because I don't want to hurt other people. And if I do something that's out of line and out of place that's hurting others, or even hurting myself, it's like, yeah, I'll let myself feel guilty about it. It's like a self-check, a recognition that like, hey, this isn't what we want to be doing. But yeah.
Assistance, but the whole fucking system is twisted. Now I'm dealing with this backlash because Marcus isn't a Christian, and I've been told that my sinful life is an addiction, but I can't buy it. It's just
yeah. And also, just another thing to put out there, when it comes to what is addiction, there are actual definitions for it when it comes to like mental health. And I get really frustrated within Christian communities where they like overstate, just like they like to call anything an addiction that is even if it's just like a really simple habit, like masturbation. It's like, it's calling it addiction is so like, it's so overblown, and it contributes to things like feeling guilty and feeling powerless to do anything about it. And yeah, there's so many things where it's like, yeah, they call it an addiction, but really it's just like learned behavior, and you can just unlearn it. And it's not like super dramatic like actual addictions where if you stop at like has extreme withdrawal symptoms and like it's really hard to stay away the rest of your life. A lot of things we can just kind of change them and they just kind of change and it's not that big of a deal. Except for when we make it into a huge deal. Anyway.
Too hard to stand beside it. I need an answer, humans can't provide it. I look at the earth, the sun, and I can tell a genius man designed it. It's truly mind-blowing, I can't deny it. Is heaven real? Is it fake? Is it really how I fantasize it? Where's the Holy Ghost at? How long does it take a man to find it?
So two things here. Okay, so he just put two different ideas out there. So one of the things I absolutely love about Hopsin and his journey of leaving the faith is like I resonate so much with him. Specifically when he said like he looks at everything and it's like, it feels like it had to have been designed by a genius. And when I first left the faith, the first thing that was easy to do was to try to find community among atheists and people who were like actively against Christianity in an intellectual level, because I'm super intellectual and that's kind of my headspace. But a lot of people who are atheists, especially like the really big name people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, a lot of times I get really frustrated with them because while I certainly hold very strongly that there's very little reason to think that humans have any clue who God is or what spirituality is, I definitely think that as human beings, there's so much more to life than just like logic and proving what's true or not true. And on some level, the idea that God might be real isn't ridiculous to me any more than the idea that he's not real. Like, I don't think that he's what Christians say he is, or what any man-made religion says he is. But on some level, it's like, the fact that we're here, the fact that we have these incredible brains that are super complex, it's like, I do accept evolution, and I definitely think that's how we got here in a naturalistic way, but at the same time, it just seems like life is so complicated, and the world is so complicated, and maybe I'm just imagining that, but also, like, it's mind-blowing to me, and the fact that anything exists blows my mind, and I'm not out to just be like, oh, God isn't real, spiritual stuff, it's, all stupid. I think there's a lot there, but we have to be very discerning, and you'd be surprised that using proof and using psychology, there's actually a lot of stuff spiritually that we can kind of understand that's really significant and useful in our lives. And a lot of that is in the Bible. I don't think the Bible's ridiculous. Just thinking that God wrote it instead of humans writing it, I think is a little ridiculous, but yeah.
My mind's a non-stop tape playing and I can't rewind it. You gave me the Bible and expect me not to analyze it.
Oh yeah, the other thing that he just said was he said, how long does it take to hear the Holy Ghost? And that's another thing where it's like, leaving the faith, everybody's like, oh, you didn't, you're being impatient or you're trying to meet God on your terms. And I'm like, I have a limited amount of life. How am I supposed to like wait my whole life until the day I die, waiting for like, maybe finally God's going to speak to me? It's like there was a point at which I was just like, I'm pretty sure this isn't, feel like I'm waiting for nothing. And so at some point you just kind of move on with life. So, yeah.
I'm frustrated and how I fantasize it, where's the Holy Ghost at? How long does it take a man to find it? My mind's a non-stop tape playing and I can't rewind it. You gave me the Bible and expect me not to analyze it? I'm frustrated and you provoked it. I'm not reading that motherfucking book because a human wrote it. I have a fucking brain, you should know it. You gave it to me to think to avoid every useless moment.
Yeah, another thing that's like a huge thing for me when it comes to like, oh, don't use logic and reason and it's about faith. I have a lot of opinions about faith. I don't think the idea of faith itself is actually ridiculous. But faith has to be based in trust, and trust has to be based in experience, and experience is based in actual physical experiences that we have felt and that we have seen. And I just forgot what he said. What was I gonna say?
I have a fucking brain!
Yeah. So it's like, I have a brain, like, and he's like, and you should know because you're the one who gave it to me. And literally, I'm like, yeah. One of the things that I journaled around the time I was leaving the faith is I was like, it makes no sense to me whatsoever that God gave or like created creatures who use logic in order to decide whether something is or isn't true. And then he's like judging us and our eternal like existence based on our ability to trust and believe in something without evidence. It's like he's the one who created us with brains to measure things that are true or not true using evidence. So like, it doesn't make any sense to me that it's like, well, I created you to follow these rules, and then I'm going to judge you based on your ability to not follow them. To me, that seems like it just doesn't make any sense to me.
You should know it. You gave it to me to think, to avoid every useless moment. It was a mission that I had to abort, cause humans be lying with such an inaccurate source.
Yeah, and humans be lying and referring to the Bible being written by humans. And I feel like it's going to get more to this, but it's just like, at some point, to me, it actually started to feel like I was hearing from people and not from God. It wasn't God who taught me what to believe about the Bible. Everybody reads the Bible and they have wildly different interpretations, and then I go to university and the professors all have different opinions themselves, and they're like super studied up on like ancient languages that the Bible was written in and all these different things. And at some point I was like, my conclusions that I'm drawing about theology and my interpretation of what the Bible is saying is all based on what other people are telling me. It's not based in what God is telling me. And the only way that I could like separate myself from other people was to just like interpret the Bible through my experience, which felt like ridiculous, and also is partly what led me out of the faith, because once I started trusting myself and asking myself what I was feeling and thinking, even in like dialogue with God, I was just kind of coming to things where I was like, what other people are saying doesn't make any sense to me. And God wasn't correcting me or telling me something that other people weren't. So then I was just like, I feel like it's people who are talking to me, and people lie to us all the time and they trick us. And obviously there are a lot of people who are well-intentioned, and I think they just don't understand. But yeah.
It's gonna be hard to put me back on the course. Next Jehovah's Witness to come on my porch, I swear I'm slamming the door. A lot of folks believe it though, but I'm not surprised. Humans are fucking dumb, still thinking that Pac's alive.
Man, and that line, again, it's like I have so many things to say, and that's why I wanted to react to this. But when he was like, humans are stupid and they believe things like Pac still being alive, that's one of the things that I learned in psychology, where it's like, even if you think that Christianity is true and that people who are like Islamic and they're false in their belief about God, or maybe you're somebody who is Christian, but then you also think that other religions are all still worshiping the same God as you, like I know some people who think that. Regardless of what it is you believe with regards to religion, there are people in the world who are just as confident as you about something they believe. Like, there are people who think that the earth is flat, as an example I always use. And they are just as convinced as you are that they're right. And it's like, there's a point where it's like, humans, when you study psychology, you start to see that humans come to believe things that are just completely ridiculous, and they hold on to them really strongly. And it starts to feel like, again, when you're believing in something that's not backed up by evidence, it's kind of like, is this just another one of those things like the earth being flat, where people believe it without evidence? Or they think that they have evidence, but the evidence doesn't actually make sense. And it's like, again, in this world of tons of competing ideas, what criteria do you use? Because everybody's asking you to believe them by trusting them and their experience and what they know is true. And the only way to, like, for me to sort through all of that is to just use logic and to be like, you know, what they're saying doesn't add up, and it doesn't line up with what I know to be true based on science and based on my experiences in the world and the stories I've heard from other people. So
I ain't trying to take your legacy and torture down. I'm just saying, I ain't heard shit from the horse's mouth.
Yep. So that's just kind of all off of what he just said. And this is the whole thing where it's like, the thing I love about him, it's like, him and I, and hopefully some other people out there, we're not out here to just be like, oh, down with religion, it's stupid, we want to get rid of it. It's more like, we feel like there are people who say that they know who God is, but we've never actually heard anything from God himself. We've just heard stuff from other people saying that they know who God is. And at some point it's kind of like, you know, if God was real, I feel like he would talk to me directly and present himself to a way in me that left no doubt in my mind. And the whole time I was a Christian, especially as I got older, I was only ever in a place of doubt, no matter how hard I tried to not be.
Just sheep always telling stories of older guys who were notarized by you, and you finally vocalized. Now I'm supposed to bow my head and close my eyes and somehow let the Holy Ghost arise? Sounds like a fucking poltergeist. Show yourself, and the boom is done. Every rumor's gone. I no longer doubt this shit. You're the one. I'll admit that my sinful ways were stupid fun, and all my old habits can hop on top of a roof to plunge. I donate to a charity that could use the funds. Fuck the club instead of bitches. I'd hang with a group of nuns, and everyone I ran into would know what I came to do. I wouldn't take a step unless it was in the name of you. I hate the fact that I have to.
Which, everything that he just said also plays into this theme where a lot of people are like, oh, the reason you're leaving the faith is because you don't like the rules and you want to, you know, live your own life. And some people, based on what he says later in the song, might even try to say that about him. But what he's saying here is it's like, I want to accept it. Like, if you just showed yourself, and I was like, oh, hey, like, it's God himself. I'm not trusting what other people said. It's actually God. And this is who he is, and this is what he wants me to do. He's like, boom, like, I'd do it. Like, tell me what to do. I'd do it, like, without a question. The problem is, it's hard to follow him when it's like, you don't feel like it's actually him that you're following, but just this thing that other people are saying that he is. So, he's not leaving, and I didn't either, because we wanted to, like, live sinful lives or something. We left, not out of choice, but because we became honestly convinced that we didn't think it was real.
Believe you haven't been chatting with me like you did Adam and Eve. And I ain't seen no fucking talking snake unravel from trees with an apple to eat. That shit never happens to me. I don't know if you do or don't exist. It's driving me crazy. Send your condolences. This is me reaching to you, so don't forget. If hell is truly a pit of fire and I get thrown in it, I'ma probably regret the fact that I ever wrote this shit.
It's so hard. I want to say so much, and also I don't want this to be ridiculously long. But when he says that, it's kind of like the whole thing where, like, when you leave, you feel like you're betraying God because you somehow feel like he's actually real, even though you've become convinced he's not, because you've had a relationship with this idea for such a long time. And so it's kind of the comical way he portrays it, but it's kind of this, like, if somehow, like, I got it wrong, that, like, even though it makes no sense to me, somehow I was missing something and you really were real, I'm going to regret leaving because I turned away from the thing that I didn't want to turn away from because I actually didn't think it was real, but I guess it really was real. But yeah, it was just kind of a funny way of putting it.
My gut feeling says it's all fake. I hate to say it, but fuck it. Shit, I done lost faith. This isn't a small phase. My perspective's all changed. My thoughts just...
Yeah, and it's not a phase either, which is something that is also really frustrating talking to people when you left the faith. And they have this attitude like, oh, well, you know, everybody goes through seasons. It's like, no, I'm very confident that it's like I see it more clearly now. I don't see it less clearly. I didn't go from a place of confusion to a place of even more confusion. For me, leaving the faith was going from a place of confusion to a place of clarity. And the world makes a lot of sense to me now. Because I stopped trying to hold on and force something that wasn't true, and taking beliefs that didn't make sense and force them into my experience. And since I'm more confident now in trusting what I actually know is true, then it's just like, I know I'm never going back because there's no way for me to unsee or to unfeel what I actually understand and see now. So yeah, it's not a phase. It's like, I understand things better now than I did before. And doesn't mean I can't be wrong, but it's highly unlikely I ever see myself returning to a specific faith because they're just way too off.
Shit apart all day! And in my mind, I make perfect sense. If you aren't real, then all my prayers aren't worth a cent. That will mean that I can just make up what my purpose is, and I can see.
I slightly disagree with him on this point. I don't think that leaving religion means I can just make up my meaning. I think that meaning actually, on some sense, can be arbitrary, but at the same time is actually rooted in actual real world laws, almost like laws of physics, but I'm not going to get into that right now.
Sit in church and just say fuck in the services. Man, what if Jesus was a facade? Then that would mean the government's God. I feel like they've been brainwashing us with a lot, so much that we don't even notice that we're stuck in the box. Man, everything is what if. Why is it always what if? Planet Earth, what if? The universe, what if? My sacrifice, what if? My afterlife, what if? Every fucking thing that deals with you is fucking suspect!
Yeah. And so since it's like everything with him, like everything just seems so uncertain, and at some point it just gets extremely frustrating because it's like, you want to believe it, but you don't actually feel like you're authentic in believing it because you can't quite, like, draw the conclusion in your brain that you actually think it's right. It's like you want to, but you just can't, like, grab hold of it because your brain is telling you, it doesn't make sense. And you're like, oh, why doesn't it just make sense so I can just hold on to it? But it's just, it's so frustrating.
I'm fucking done! I'm fucking done! This is my fucking life and I'm living it. I'm having fun. If you really care for me, prove that I need to live carefully.
I'm not a huge fan of the fact that he used the word fun there. Because again, I think it kind of has a hedonistic kind of tone to it where it's kind of like, well, if God isn't real, then I can just go do whatever I want. Which I think is a misunderstanding of how humans experience life anyway. Because human beings aren't happy and excited and love their life when they just go do hedonistic things all the time. But just like this frustration and just being like, I'm done. Like, you're trying so hard to hold on and it's not working, and like the level of frustration there is just like, it blows my mind. All the people reacting to it who weren't necessarily Christian, they're just kind of like, felt like he's making such a big deal out of it. Like, I don't know, like you change your mind about things all the time. Why is, you get so mad and you're like screaming at the sky at the top of your lungs. But when you're like, when it's rooted in this like really deeply emotional sense of like loyalty and commitment to something, letting go of it when you don't want to let go of it, but your mind is kind of like, yeah, but it's not true, but like you don't want to believe it, and like it's like this war inside of you of logic versus emotion, and it's so hard not to let the emotion win out, and it creates this like pressure that just builds and builds and builds until one day you just like explode, because you're just like, I'm done. Like, I'm so fucking done. Because it's just like, if God was real, I shouldn't reach this place of such extreme frustration. Like, if God is real, I feel like I should be filled with peace and with confidence. And I never got that, and obviously he didn't either. And at some point you just get mad because you're like trying so hard to hold on and it's not working. So.
But I'll be damned if I put my own pleasure aside for an afterlife that isn't even guaranteed. We are you, and you're us. Stop playing games. My life's all I got, and heaven is all in my brain.
Okay, so he said, stop playing games. That's one of the biggest things that like I journaled over and over and over and over the last year while I was still in the faith, where I was just like, I felt like I was being toyed with. It was like with everybody saying like, oh, you just need to reach out to God and he'll respond. And like when I was by myself in a room and nobody else was involved, I was just like, if God is real and somehow I can't seem to come to peace about it, like it felt like I was being toyed with. It just felt like I was, having something dangled in front of my face, and it's like, oh, like every time you reach for it, like it's pulled away from you. And at some point you're just kind of like, do you actually want a relationship with me? Because if you did, I feel like it wouldn't be this hard to find you when I'm trying so fucking hard. Like, and of course everybody wants to know how hard you tried. Like some of the other reaction videos to this song from people who are Christian, sometimes they imply, and this, I get this so much, where people are like, again, either they're like, oh, you're trying to meet God on your terms, or they'll be like, well, maybe they weren't actually really trying and authentically seeking God. And it's like, how the fuck do you know whether I'm being authentic or not? Like, you don't know anything. And the only reason people will say that is because they can't, it doesn't fit into their little picture that somebody who was authentically seeking God wouldn't find him. But the fact is, that's exactly why I left, because I can't see how I could be any more authentic in my looking for God, and I didn't find him. And to me, that is, on a just basically logical level, completely incompatible with what Christians are teaching, which is that if you seek God, you will find him. And I didn't. And I don't think there's anything else I could have done about it. So, yeah, anyway. There's one other thing that he said, but I have to play it to remember.
My life's all I got, and heaven is all in my brain.
And then he'll say,
and when I feel I'm in hell, my ideas are what get me through pain.
Yeah. And so, in an interview, and I might react to this interview, I might have even said that already, but there's kind of this concept where, especially me now believing that the Bible was written by people, I think that even like in literature over the ages, and the Bible represents some literature written by humans, concepts of heaven and hell are more like metaphorical for something that we actually do experience in our lives. And I remember that there were even times as a Christian when people who were Christian were referred to Jesus' ministry as calling us to stand up to hell as it appeared on earth. And one of those specifically, I was involved in jail ministry, and the U.S. prison system is so fucked up. And there were some jail chaplains who felt very strongly this way, who were speaking at our university one time, and they were referring to our prisons in the U.S. as kind of like a manifestation of like a modern day hell. And you could easily imagine something like concentration camps in Nazi Germany as being kind of modern day hell. And things like mental illness can create a world inside somebody's mind where what they're experiencing on a daily basis is basically a living hell. Like, that's a phrase we use a lot, right? Living hell. And on the flip side, there are experiences and things that we have on earth where it's like, it doesn't get better than this. And like, that's another phrase that we have, right? And so, in a lot of ways, and I think this is what he's saying, in fact, I know it's what he's saying because he says this in an interview, but he's kind of more pulling into this idea that heaven and hell is more something that created through the way that we live our lives here on earth. And I really strongly feel that way, and that's partly where I derive my sense of meaning, through trying to help others to understand the world so that they might live a life that's reflective of heaven on earth rather than living a life that's reflective of hell on earth. So
Do as you please, and I'll just do me. I'm a human, I'll stay in my lane. Ill mind.
I just like the end when he's like, I'll stay in my lane, and that kind of goes along with the theme he kind of had through the whole video, where it's just like, I'm just a human being. And so much of the time I feel that way, where it's like Christians want to say that since I'm a human being, I need to trust God. And I'm more of the mind, it's like, I'm just a human being. How the fuck do I know what's true about the world or not? There's so little that I know about the world. And that doesn't mean that I have to trust something that I can't prove without logic. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, if I don't know what's true or not true, then I should maintain a position of not knowing. Not have a position of claiming to know something that can't be proven because I'm too stupid to understand it. It's like, I am too stupid to understand it. And that's why I have a lot more peace just trying to not understand it. And just not trying to have answers to questions that are impossible for a human being to answer because they're so beyond us. So that's largely why I'm like, maybe God is real, but I don't feel like I have the capacity to be able to quantify that in a way that changes my life. And when it comes to other people saying that, oh, but Jesus, came down and told us who God was and stuff. And I'm like, other people are telling me that. God didn't tell me that. And people are stupid, and people believe all sorts of things. And Christians aren't the only ones trying to tell me to believe what they say. And if I can't use proof or logic to validate what somebody's saying, I just have to maintain a position of, I don't know. I don't believe it or not believe it. I just don't know. So, yeah. And that's the end of the video. This is, how long is it? It's like 60 seconds of him just walking into the desert. I'm wondering if this is like the salt flats over in Utah. Lindsey Sterling filmed a video there back in the day. Which also, this was recorded back in 2014, I think, so that actually wasn't too separated from the time when Lindsey Sterling recorded her video in the salt flats. But, yeah. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I don't know how long this is at this point, but hopefully it's not too long. If you find interesting anything that I said, feel free to leave a comment, and I'd be very interested to hear what some people have to say about some of my thoughts on this video. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my breakdown of the song, and have a wonderful day.